Hi, this is Rabbi Chaim Kaufman. Welcome to our 51st installment in the Torah portion of the week. We're holding by Parshas Nitzavim, which we're getting towards the end of the book of Deuteronomy. The beginning of the Parsha says that you are standing today, all of you before Hashem your God, the heads of your tribes, your elders, your officers, all the men of Israel, your small children, your women, proselyters in the midst of your camp, from the hewer of your wood to the drawer of your water. So again, the beginning of Parshas Nitzavim, chapter 29, verses 9 and 10. So again, this is Moshe Rabbeinu's swan song, so to speak. This is, right before he dies, he's giving over to the Jewish people, and he tells them, stand before Hashem your God, or you're standing here in front of all the heads of the tribes, the elders, your officers, all the men of Israel, etc. So there's a lot going on in this one verse. Says Moed Rebbe, Arav Agon Ramosh Star Moshlita, may be well. He brings down in Tam Vadas in his book on the Torah portion of the week. Rashi asks the following question. Rashi in verse 14, chapter 29, verse 14, asks the question: why is Parshas Nitzavim close to last week's Parsha, the end of last week's Parsha? Why does it follow the curses that the Jewish people heard? Right, the Jewish people heard 100 curses minus 2. So the question is, what's the connection? Why is this Parsha connected to the Parsha before? So Rashi asks the question, why is that? And the Kohanim were a little bit depressed. Their faces fell, and with all these curses, they said, how can we withstand it? How are we going to be able to, stand up to these curses? Sounds definitely pretty depressing. Sounds like, if the Jewish people don't do what they're supposed to do, they're going to be wiped off the face of the map. That certainly can't be good. So Moshe Rabbeinu begins to appease them by saying, you're standing here today, right? You're standing here today even though you got God very upset. You did things that God didn't want you to do. Nonetheless, look at God's mercy. God's mercy shows that He didn't destroy you. He could have wiped you off the face of the map. Obviously, that's pretty bad. Right? But you're still standing here today. So my Rebbe asked the question. He asked the question that, there are the Kohanim are depressed because they hear these 100 curses, or 100 curses minus 2. And Moshe Rabbeinu says, well, don't worry, because even though you got God angry, and really you deserve to be wiped off the face of the map, when we do things wrong, so we pull ourselves away from Him, it's much more difficult for us to come back after we take 2 steps backwards by not doing what God wants us to do. But he says, nonetheless, God didn't wipe you off the face of the map and you're still standing here. So my Rebbe asks, what kind of comfort is that? Really, you should have wiped off the face of the earth. But God did it and you're still standing here. Well, it makes me feel a lot better, doesn't it? Right? It doesn't make a whole lot of sense. So he says, Moshe Rabbeinu had no intention, certainly, of wanting to get them angry. Right? Or making them feel bad. Even worse, because, they hear these curses. So he says that even though you got God upset and you transgressed what He wanted to do, nonetheless, yeah, we should have fear. We should realize there's going to be punishment. We should realize there's going to be repercussions for our actions. And God forbid, these curses could come true. So we have to take stock of our action. That's true. But again, where is, how are they supposed to feel from this? If He's trying to make them, He's trying to console them, then this may not be the exact way to do such a thing. So Rebbe says no. He says that God promised, there's an eternal promise that he's never going to wipe out the Jewish people 100%. It's a nation that's going to live on forever. And regardless of all the difficulty, the suffering that they go through from their enemies, they're not going to get wiped out. So the Chofetz Chaim, famous Chofetz Chaim, knew that this is true. Before World War II, Chofetz Chaim passed away, but he knew and he understood that even if bad things happen, let's say, to the Jews in Europe, there are still Jews in the land of Israel, there are still Jews in America, South America, other places. So he knew that, God forbid, if one camp got wiped out, or one group got wiped out, the others would still be around. How does he know that? Where does he know it from? So he knows it from the story of Yaakov and Esau. That when Esau comes, he comes with 400 men. Yaakov is terrified. So what does Yaakov do? He splits up the camp. So if God forbid that Esau goes to war, and he destroys the first camp, the other camp will escape. So Chofetz Chaim said, so we see from the story of Yaakov, that for sure, God will never wipe out the Jewish people entirely. So if one group, God forbid, gets punished and gets wiped out, there are other Jews in other places that will survive. So here he brings out, yes, there are tremendous tragedies that have occurred to the Jewish people, tremendous suffering that the Jewish people have gone through. Nonetheless, every Jew is warned over here to serve God properly, to guard his Torah, and not go against what he wants us to do. So these klolas, these curses shouldn't come to bear fruit. So the parsha over here, before in Parshas Nitzavim, that spoke about these curses. The curses are if you look at them, they are in singular form. They're not in plural form. And here, the Torah speaks in plural. Atem Nitzavim. You are standing here today. You, plural. So that everybody shouldn't feel that it's a strong character trait of judgment, that God's going to get so upset that he's going to wipe out everyone in one shot. That's definitely not true. And the reason it's not true is because he's never going to wipe out his entire people. So, on one hand, that is tremendous solace. The solace is that God is saying, yes, you have to do what I tell you to do. I've written a book. I manufactured it myself. It's called the Torah. You have to keep what I said in there. I gave it over to Moshe. Moshe passed it down. But realize, if you don't keep what you're supposed to keep, and you don't uphold your end of the bargain, then what's going to happen is these curses could certainly come true. And if you look at the curses, they're tremendously horrific. If you look at them, and unfortunately they have come true, because we didn't do what we're supposed to do. So, at the same time, even if there's suffering, and there's difficulty, and there's tragedy, the Jewish people march on. The Jewish people, God's chosen nation, chosen because we chose Him and He chose us, which doesn't make us better. The only thing that makes us different from everybody else is the fact that we have the Torah. We have commandments that we have an obligation to fill. Now, non-Jews also have to keep whatever whatever they need to do by the seven Noahide laws, which are much more than that. But at the end of the day, the Jewish people, the one that chose God, we're the ones that accepted the Torah, no other nation. So the onus, the responsibility is ours. So we can't shirk that responsibility. We can't place blame on others for the misfortune of the Jewish people in general. Meaning, there are 13, 14 million Jews in the world. Probably 13 million of them don't know anything about Judaism. Very, very high number. So the ones that don't know about Judaism, that are apathetic, that are not interested for whatever reason, have run away from Judaism, they're going to be held responsible. They won't be held responsible as someone who understood what Judaism is and left. We all have trials and tribulations. But the ones who don't have a connection to Judaism because they were never taught, so they are responsible. They are responsible. They're just not going to be responsible as if they've done a rebellion against God. Because it's only a rebellion, so to speak, since they're not educated. And they're not educated properly, but they're still responsible. So the punishment they'll pay for what they do is as if they've done something by accident. Now, if they knew about it, and they understood what it is, and they said, well, I still don't want it, okay, that's a rebellion. That's like doing it on purpose. Most people are probably not that brazen, because they don't know enough. Once they've been exposed, and once they know, that's already a different story. So we see that the Jewish people as a collective unit are going to pay a certain price. But the price will not be utter destruction. Even if we deserve it. Now if we look in the world and we see what's going on in the world, then we're not doing our job properly. You'll tell me, there are more people today sitting and learning Torah than even from the time of the Second Temple, which may be true. Scholarship obviously at a much lower level, no question about that. Nonetheless, even if that's true, look at, all the other things that are going on within the Jewish people. Disagreements, intermarriage, tremendous lack of knowledge, lack of awareness. If you want to look in a mirror and see what comes out on the other side. In other words, if for instance, Jewish women were careful about the laws of modesty, so then other women in the world would be living like Victorian England. Well, we don't live in Victorian England. So therefore, if we don't do what we're supposed to do, let's say in that category, we'll mention that for a second. So then there's a mirror image that comes out opposite. So if we, the Jewish people, are not careful in the laws of modesty, so then immorality goes rampant and immodesty goes rampant. Because see, everything depends on us. Since God gave us the Torah, we have to uphold it. If we don't uphold it, there are ripples. It's a ripple effect across the board in the world. In the physical world, in the spiritual world. On the other hand, we can do tremendously good things. Right? We learn Torah, we go to classes, we try and become better people. That has a positive effect in the world. So, that can change things as well. Through our actions. And we've spoken about that a number of times. In a number of videos, that our actions absolutely matter. They absolutely have an effect in this world and in the spiritual world. Because when a person, for instance, just give one example, when a person, for instance, makes a blessing on an apple, that's a spiritual act. You're going to say, really? Just ate an apple. What do you mean? He makes the blessing on an apple. He eats the apple because he's hungry. So he makes a blessing, blessed are you, God, King of the universe, who created fruit of the tree. So what's the essence of the blessing? The essence of the blessing is that we're acknowledging God exists and he runs the world. That's what makes a blessing a blessing. If you don't mention God's name, or you don't mention that he's king of the world, if you only mention one and not the other, so you don't have to worry about a blessing in vain, that's not a blessing at all. You need both. You need God's name. You need the fact that he's king. So this is an important thing. Because whatever blessing is made, we're acknowledging that. Now, a person eats doesn't make a blessing. So basically you think you're getting this for free. It's as if you're a thief. Because you're taking something and not giving credit to where it came from. You go, well, I don't believe in the rabbis, I don't believe in this, and okay, you can say whatever you want. And it's not a video about oral tradition and why we have to do what we have to do. But at the end of the day, you're not acknowledging what you need to acknowledge. God gave you food, you should acknowledge it. You should acknowledge it came from him. Say, oh, I got a job and I worked and I made this money and through this money I have food. Well, that may be true. That definitely may be true, but keep in mind that God runs the world. The Torah says that at a certain time the Jewish people are going to live off the fat of the land, meaning they're going to have money. And God says, when you get plenty of money, don't forget me. So they say, what do you mean? How am I going to forget? How is it possible I'm going to forget? Didn't God take us out of Egypt? Doesn't he have a connection to us? Look at all the things he's done for us. Even our own puny lives. Gives us life. Doesn't want to give us life, doesn't have to. Person go to sleep, not wake up the next day. Can happen. So, you got to be thankful. You have to appreciate. That's last week's Parsha about Bikurim. It's all about appreciation. We have to appreciate what God's done for us. So you eat something, you don't make a blessing as a Jew. So you don't appreciate. You appreciate all three of us. Me, myself, and I. And it's as if you took your own hand and pulled yourself out of your mother's womb. We call that in the vernacular gaiva. Gaiva means being conceited. Thinking that, you are the world. You are the most important thing. Like everything else around you is irrelevant. So why don't you show appreciation? Or they always, I'm lazy. Not a question about being lazy. It's a question of not knowing what the reality is. So when you don't know what the reality is, you don't make a blessing. Very simple. Or you say, well, I'm not interested. I don't have to make a blessing. It's only the Orthodox. I don't have to make a blessing. You don't have to show appreciation. Of course I show appreciation. I did everything myself. Really? Gave life to yourself? Maybe just an accident. Can't take things for granted. So Rebbe here continues, and he says that if you go further in the verses, it's in the singular language as we mentioned, that each one has to guard his own path. He himself has to have his own connection. His own connection to God. But he's got a singular connection because he's a singular person. So he's got his own connection to God, but he's part of a bigger picture. What's the bigger picture? Biggest picture is the Jewish people as a whole. So if he keeps the Torah, that's very good. So that can have positive influence in the world. If he separates himself from the community, and he says in his heart, everything will be good with me, I don't need you, guy walks away, not interested in being part of the community, he gets erased. It's like you're erasing God's name from under the heavens. Well, that sounds pretty bad. So then what happened to his connection to God? What happened to his own covenant? So this gets into a much bigger issue. Remember, when you go back to the book of Genesis, and you see that Abraham made a covenant between the parts, what we call the bris bein habesarim, and he walks through the animals, which God tells him to do. He walks through the animals, makes a covenant between him and God. Now that covenant goes further. Not just for him, but for his kids, for his grandkids, for all generations, i.e. what's eventually going to be the Jewish people. Now a person has a fundamental choice. Your fundamental choice based on having free will is that a person can either choose to go in the right direction or the wrong direction. So you go in the right direction, what God wants you to do, that's good. If you go in the wrong direction, well, that's not so good. So we see by the curses that going in the wrong direction, it's going to be a serious price to pay. Not just for the individual, but for the Jewish people. We have our own covenant. A person can choose to break their covenant if they want to. They can choose that. They have free will. Nobody's pointing a gun to your head. Even though we may say free will is limited to a certain extent, but in general we have free will. So if you have free will, okay, I can make the choice. You can say, well, it's not fair if I don't do the right thing. I'll get zapped later. Well, that may be true. So you say, where's my free will? Free will comes in that if I do something wrong right now, you'd get zapped straight away. That would take away your free will. But if you choose to do something, and it's not what God wants, God has a tremendous amount of mercy. God can cut you a lot of slack. Eventually you're going to pay a price. You're going to say, well, it's not fair. Why should I have to pay a price? Because there are repercussions. There are consequences for what we do. We don't even understand to the extent of what these consequences are, but they are severe. Consequences are absolutely severe. So a person, if they choose to, can break that covenant. Now keep in mind, if you break that covenant, as we mentioned, you pay a price. But not just you as an individual. Entire Jewish people pay a price. Imagine it's like having a necklace. And each strand in the necklace plays its own part. If one strand or one link in the necklace doesn't do what it's supposed to do, i.e. it breaks, cracks, whatever the case is, what happens to the other links? They also crack. And eventually, enough of them crack, the whole thing falls apart. So they say, well, okay, it's an interesting example. So how does that play out with the Jewish people? So the Jewish people are all intertwined. We're all part of one nation. So if you have some people, or God forbid, a lot of people don't uphold their end of the bargain, which is this covenant, so then that connection gets weaker. Now that connection can eventually break. It can break, but it doesn't mean it gets demolished, meaning it gets destroyed. As we mentioned before, my Rebbe here pointed out, that the comfort is, there were all these curses. And unfortunately, they've come true throughout history. Now, the saving grace, so to speak, is that even though they've come true, Jewish people are still here. We still exist. And will continue to exist for all generations. You won't have a generation where there are no Jews. Because God has promised He will not wipe them off the face of the map. He may wipe out a lot of them, but He won't wipe out everybody. So if we're standing here today, that means that God has a lot of mercy. That even though we transgressed, and we seemingly spit in his face, and we didn't do what he wanted us to do, okay? That's your choice. That's absolutely your choice. So you would think, okay, God says, I've had enough. You want to do this to me? Well, I'm going to take it all out on the entire Jewish nation. And therefore, I'm just going to get rid of this nation. Now, that hasn't happened and it won't happen. God forbid. We may invoke his anger. There may be pogroms. There may be thousands of people killed, God forbid. But it's not going to be everybody. That's a huge thing. Because if you look at these curses, that's pretty depressing. You go at one after another, after another, after another. Who's going to be left? Who's holding by it at all? Pretty bad. But the fact that we're still standing here today shows that we can withstand it. That, yeah, people will be gassed, people may be burnt, may be killed, all these other things, that may be true. But at the end of the day, we're still around. We're still ticking. So Rebbe points out as well, he gives an interesting mushal, an interesting parable. So he says that the Jewish people in this world today are like a boat that's about to come apart in a storm. Right? This big storm comes and wants to sink the boat. So what do people on the boat think is going to happen? The boat's going to get ripped to shreds. Right? Strong winds, being tossed around. It's just a matter of time where the boat just comes apart. Right? At any second that could happen. So there are a few individuals that try and steer the boat clean. Right? Try and drive it, steer it so you'll at least still be able to survive. You're in this big tempest, in this storm, you can say, all right, everyone overboard. Well, everyone goes overboard, everyone dies, most likely. So you try to the best of your ability to try and steer it clear. To make sure that the boat does not get destroyed. Now, these people haven't given up hope. They haven't lost hope. And they're doing everything in their power to keep the ship together. So these people will have the merit to see the good fortune of their actions. Because even though the ship looks like it's going to get destroyed, so they help steer it away from the storm in order to survive. They haven't given up hope. Others may have given up hope. These few individuals haven't. So too, what happened to the Jewish people in exile. And every generation it seems that we pass through these difficult waters, these difficult straits, that the water wants to seemingly drown us and destroy us, that there shouldn't be anything left. And there are all kinds of different things that could be. It could be, physical slaughter from our enemies. It could be spiritual, right? It could be, socialism, communism, all these different things that have taken Jews away from Judaism. It could be either way, physical or spiritual. Nonetheless, it's been a promise. The promise is God's not going to forsake us. The Jewish people will not get destroyed. God is going to redeem us, right? He's going to bring the Messiah. He's going to redeem us. And all the nations will see God is God. And He runs the world. Because if we didn't have a Redeemer, and there wasn't the hope of a Redeemer, future Redeemer, then there would be no hope at all. Because if there wouldn't be that ultimate promise, then the Jewish people would have gone through all these things throughout history, basically for naught. So this is a major idea, it's a major tenet of Judaism, one of the 13 principles of faith about belief in the Messiah, that a person can go through this world and being a Jew could really give up hope. Because we look at where Judaism is today, we're certainly not at the, we're not at the top. There's been a lot of things that have changed over the years. Judaism's come back. Right? Orthodox Jews have come back in strong numbers. Very, very strong numbers. People thought, after the war, Judaism was dead. And it certainly looked that way. But slowly over the years, it's been replenished. Not fully, certainly not. But it's been replenished. I mean, only in the Orthodox community. Every other community is dying. Or is basically dead. Or if they're not dead, they're just waiting to be dead. To be buried. Right? But the only thriving Judaism today is through the Orthodox community. Now, that being said, so when you look at what has happened, over the last 60 years, since the Holocaust, was a tremendous decree. A tremendous decree where most of European Jewry is wiped off the face of the map. A horrible decree. But the Jews in Israel survived. Jews in America survived. The only problem is that the majority of Jews today are wiping themselves off the face of the map spiritually just because they're not educated. So throughout history, the Jewish people have been on this rocky boat. Well, it's actually more than a rocky boat. It's a boat that's willing to come apart at the seams. That's, just about ready to come apart at the seams. But still, you have those individuals try and guide it. Try and get it to a safe place. So that is something that is comforting. Because regardless of what's going to happen in the future, the Jewish people will still be around. How many? It's a good question. If we look, at what's supposed to be in the war of Gog and Magog at the end of days, doesn't look pretty. Looks like a lot of people are going to die. And even if a lot of Jews die, not all of them will. Because you have this ultimate promise. Again, you want to break the promise? Your choice. So you want to break that covenant? It's your choice. God is not going to break his. His ultimate covenant with the entire nation. So when we became a nation, and we said, Na'aseh v'nishma, when we said, we will do and then we will hear, Jewish people didn't know what they were getting themselves into, but they didn't care, because God had a track record. Jewish people believed in God, God believed in them, that's it, deal was made. Anyone after that who wants to be part of it, they have to go through conversion. They have to convert. They lost their opportunity. But it's a tremendous responsibility. Most people would rather forget that they're Jewish in general. It's embarrassing. The main reason is because they don't even know what it is. They're missing the elements, the strong elements of what makes up Judaism, what makes someone a Jew. Making someone a Jew doesn't mean that he's just born from a Jewish mother. There are basic tenets that all Jews have to uphold. They're called the 13 principles of faith. So some of those principles include believing that God is absolute, that God is unique, there's no other being like him in the world. And that absoluteness, has the ability to reward and punish. In other words, if we do what this absolute God wants, so if we do good, fine. If not, then we're going to pay a price. God has a connection to his creation. He knows the thoughts of man. So as what we started with, we are responsible for what we do, 100%. We're going to get upstairs after 120 years. We're going to have to answer. Right? It's what Rosh Hashanah is all about. We'll make a video shortly on Rosh Hashanah. But that's what it's about. It's about judgment. What I did in this world. Where I was holding. So God has to be absolute. And he has to be able to reward and punish. It can't be God created the world, disappeared, and he made all these other forces, and he put them in charge, and God disappeared. Now, that'd be a little bit hard to say. First of all, God represents the entire universe. Where's he hiding? There he is in the cave. Boom! Like, where is he? So many have made the mistake, Pharaoh included, that believed God created the world, but he disappeared. And he let these other forces fight it out. And then whatever happens, happens. Well, that goes against the 13 principles. And certainly none of these forces can have power outside of themselves. If God wants the ocean to make a tidal wave, he'll do it. If he doesn't, he won't. But the idea is that it's like we're living in this boat that's ready to come apart. Nations want to come and destroy us. Anti-Semitism's all over the place. Nothing new. Sometimes more intense, sometimes less intense. But it seems like it's going to get more intense, before the end of days, when the Messiah comes. Well, it seems like. Doesn't seem like it's going to get better before it gets worse. Just the opposite. So, Moshe's telling the Jewish people, listen, you just heard all these curses. You could say all these curses, it's too much for me. We can't uphold it. We can't withstand it. We may not even survive it. Moshe Rabbeinu says, don't worry. If you're still standing here today and you tick God off, you'll still be here. There'll still be a future Jewish people. How many of them? That's a good question. But there will be a future. There has to be a future. Can't have the world without the Jewish people. Some people may say, oh, that's being arrogant. Well, let's look at the Torah. Look at whatever version you want. The Torah is very clear. God chose us, we chose him. Everything depends on us. Our actions matter. We may think that they don't, but they matter. They have repercussions. Can't shirk our responsibility. There are millions of Jews don't know anything about Judaism. What are we doing to educate them? What are we doing? Quoting Dennis the Menace as a sermon. Harav Agon. Morenu v'Rabbeinu. Right? Our master. Get a Mickey Mouse rabbi stands up on a pulpit on a Friday night or a Shabbos morning. And he's making an ethical point quoting Dennis the Menace. Gotta ask yourself. Why didn't he quote Calvin and Hobbes? Why didn't he quote the Far Side? Quoting Dennis the Menace? Do we take what we do seriously? Or is it all just about an act? Is that what Judaism has become? how much we can perform, how much we can show the masses, like, I don't know, like Hollywood. And the more we act, the more people maybe we'll bring in, but it's an act. Judaism won't survive in such a case. Because people see it's a farce. So we have to take our own covenant, strengthen it, nurture it, make it as strong as we can. Person has to roll up his sleeves. Person's got to work hard. Got to dig in the trenches. You got to want it. It's got, as King Solomon says in Proverbs, you got to search and want Torah as much as you want rubies and diamonds. That's how important it has to be. Most people see Torah as like something that's, obviously they don't know what it is. Never been really exposed to it. They don't see the beauty because people teaching it don't believe in it. But it could be a lot of people just shallow. They just, they're apathetic. Like trying to start a cheap with a 9-volt. So I'll give one example of this. A Jew has an obligation to keep kosher. Not just inside his house, outside his house as well. Now, the rabbis learn out, and although this may not be proven, doesn't mean that it's not true. There are plenty of things science hasn't proven, which makes, doesn't mean that it's not true, even if they haven't proven it. So one such example is that, according to some, the reasons why we eat certain animals and not other animals are because we are what we eat. So that means that if you eat an animal that's a carnivore and you don't, even if you kill it properly, it's a carnivore, we don't eat carnivores. Because what we eat is really the soul of the animal. Even take out all the blood. What you're eating is really the soul of the animal. So that means that if I eat an animal that, let's say a bird of prey, and a person eats it, that means they're going to prey on others? No, it doesn't, that's not going to happen automatically, for sure. May not even happen in their lifetime. Could it make a person more angry? Could they have a certain edge to them because of it? Now again, you're going to say, what are you talking about? It hasn't been proven. 100%. According to some major rabbinical authorities, even though it may not be proven, that could be a possible reason why we keep kosher. But it goes beyond that. A person doesn't keep kosher, it eats all kinds of things you're not supposed to eat. What does it do? So Talmud says, again, get into oral tradition here. All you Karaites, shut off the tape, shut off the video right now. What it means is that it can dull your heart. It dulls the heart. It makes you more vulnerable and more apathetic to spiritual things. Can a person overcome that? Yeah. It's called tshuva. It's called repentance. It's called eating kosher. Kosher doesn't mean that it's clean. Most people make that mistake. Doesn't mean that. There are certain way that animals are slaughtered and how they're prepared afterwards. You got to get all the blood out. Can't eat blood. Torah says a number of times you can't eat blood because the blood's the soul of an animal. It's like you're eating the soul of that animal. That's why kosher meat, A, is more expensive, and B, it tastes more salty for that reason. So, if a person doesn't keep the mitzvah of keeping kosher, a Jew, this applies to a Jew, not to a non-Jew. Non-Jew wants to keep kosher, they get married for it, but they have no obligation to keep it. A Jew, their soul is affected differently. So if you eat non-kosher majority of your life or all your life, that person is probably going to be more apathetic to Judaism, to want to keep any mitzvahs. Doesn't mean he won't, no. But you're putting yourself at a tremendous disadvantage. Why is it that most American Jews today are apathetic? In other words, if you would have told them 60, 70 years ago, we got to do something, Judaism may die, our grandparents, the great-grandparents, would have shuddered at such a thought. 60 years later, you ask them the same question and say, what are we going to do? We're going to all these people intermarry and all this? So it's like, okay, so Judaism died. It's a new generation. What can we do? What happened? What changed? What changed was their attitude. That the more you go away from the Torah, eventually you're just going to leave it all together. You give it, you speak about it a little bit, you give a little bit of Judaism, not too much, God forbid they should, a person should actually observe some of the commandments. Be that as it may, you enact in certain behavior, as this case of not keeping kosher, it dulls the heart, dulls the soul. It makes a person more apathetic. And you got a lot of Jews out there that are apathetic. Could care less. Judaism doesn't apply to me, I'm not interested. So you'll say, yeah, it's because of education, they weren't exposed. A lot of it's very true. Let's see, the rabbis at the Talmud weren't stupid. They understood. You eat things that you're not supposed to eat, even if it means you ate, some vegetables, you didn't check them for bugs. Let's say they were infested with bugs. You end up eating bugs, which is worse than eating pork. Because you eat a bug, it's 5 transgressions in one shot. Eating pork is only 1. So what that does is, the more you do it, the more it weakens a person's resolve. Has it been proven? No. But the rabbis understood. There are characteristics and character traits of what we eat. And what goes in our mouths as Jews. There's a reason that we only eat animals that are herbivores. That only eat vegetables. There could be 100 reasons why. They may be true, they may not be true. Right? That's not the only reason why we keep kosher. There could be a number of reasons why. I'm just pointing out that with our own covenant, if so many people have broken it, that's probably one of the first places to look. Because if they don't keep kosher, most likely their soul is just apathetic. And basically, being apathetic is akin to being dead, spiritually. You need a nuclear bomb to resurrect it. Not saying it's not possible. But the more garbage you put in and continue to put in, the further away you go. It just eats away and eats away and eats away until, there's almost nothing left. Person can choose that. That's their choice. It's not what God wants. God gave it, we have free choice because man ate from the tree of knowledge. So we absolutely have free choice then also, which is different than what it is today. He wanted us to have free choice. But he wanted us to have free choice to make the right choice. You don't make the right choice, okay, that's your decision to do. But realize that a person who has no feelings for Judaism or been minimalistically exposed to what Judaism is, one most likely cause is kashrus. Is not keeping kosher. Because eating these other things have dulled their spiritual side. Now again, that's what the rabbis tell us. You can tell me, well, hasn't been proven, I don't have to listen to them. Okay, you don't. Then you have to come up with other reasons why most people are apathetic. I mean, you can come up with other reasons. I'm just pointing out one. So the point is, we're still standing here. Anyone listening, watching this video, you're still going to be standing here as a Jew, or a non-Jew in the process of conversion, whatever the case is. But we're still here. We still have the ability to be here. So even if God forbid, God's going to make a bad decree, you can't destroy everyone. The question is what we do and how we make that covenant, our own personal covenant, stronger, which makes the covenant of the Jewish people stronger as well. Just want to remind people that I do give conversion classes, Noahide classes. Take a look at my Facebook fan page, Beyond Orthodox Conversion to Judaism, or Beyond Noahide, or my blog, orthodoxconversion.com. I also give a class, an intro to Kabbalah, on Derech Hashem, the Way of God, by the Ramchal, Rav Moshe Chaim Luzzatto, where we speak about why God created the world, purpose of man, divine providence, prophecy, where the nations come in. Also, every Wednesday night, 8 o'clock Central Time. So I do a video live on Tanakh Talk, T-E-N-A-K, T-A-L-K, on controversial issues. And this week, we're going to be speaking about the second part of reincarnation. We're going to go through more practical things about what can happen. A person can come back to this world as a reincarnated soul. Yes, it is a Jewish concept. Anyone interested, any of these things, can certainly contact me, rabbichaimkaufman@gmail.com, RABBICHAIMCOFFMAN @gmail.com. Everyone have a great Shabbos.